So we've been talking about elasticity, and really we should know by now that elasticity is really measuring the impact of, in the case of price elasticity of demand, it measures the impact of a price change on the quantity purchased, okay? So we're really trying to get a sense for how sensitive are people to price changes. That's effectively what it boils down to from the point of view of elasticity. And we've done a lot of examples on the most important topic here, which is price elasticity of demand. But there are other types of elasticities out there that we should be familiar with as well. And today I wanted to look at three in particular, and that is the elasticity of supply, income elasticity, and cross elasticity of demand. So there's really in total there are four, of which really the very first one, the price elasticity, is by far the most important. So it's a kind of a 80-20 type thing. The first one of this extra group deals with supply. And again, you know, when we talked about the demand side, we're looking at the consumer. What we've looked at already, for example, is, you know, a consumer looked at it and said, no, I'm not going to buy it, or yes, I'm going to buy it. The price changes and it kind of makes them squeamish and to say, okay, I'm not going to bother, or I'm going to buy it reluctantly. Now we're looking at the supplier. Okay, we got to take it from the supplier's point of view and say, how sensitive is the supplier to price changes? So when we think about the elasticity of supply, we're really looking at the farmer, the fisherman, the miner, these people who provide the products that we buy, okay, the suppliers. And we're kind of asking ourselves, you know, if we change the price on the supply, or the supply price changed, how quick would the supplier be to change the quantity? And to what degree would they change the quantity? So for example, let's assume that the price of eggs go up. Okay, the price goes up. How much more egg would be supplied by egg farmers? Because they knew if the price went up, they could probably make more money, more and more rush into the market. They'd get more chickens, they'd lay more eggs, and voila, we'd have more eggs coming onto the market. Or, for example, if the price of gas goes up, gasoline, when you go up and put some in your car and you see the price go up, what impact does that have on the Mobils of the world, the Exxon Mobils of the world, to drill, to go seek for oil on the Grand Banks? Because the higher the price of oil, the more likely they're going to produce more, right? So what this elasticity of supply looks at is exactly the same thing, but from the supply side. So what we're looking at is a simple formula that is almost identical to the price elasticity of demand formula. What it does is it takes the percentage change in the quantity supplied, how much the supplier produces originally, how much the supplier is producing now. So we're looking at the difference between what was applied at point 0 and what was supplied at time 1. And we're saying to ourselves, did the supply increase? How much did it decrease? How much did it increase? So if we went from supply of 1 to a supply of 2, we look at it and we say that was an absolute difference of 1. It went from 1 to 2. So the supply changed, it increased by 1. We also would want to think, well, how much of a percentage is that? Well, in order to calculate the percentage of supply, same sort of thing, we take the difference between, or we look for the average. We take the difference, find out how many it moved. So it moved by 1. And then we take the average quantity supplied. So the average, it went from 1 to 2, so the average was 1.5. So you take the 1, you divide it by 1.5, and voila, you get the change, the percentage change in supply. So that would be that particular calculation. And the percentage change in price is exactly what we did with the other one. We said, okay, what was the original price? What was the new price? What's the absolute difference between them? So we look at the absolute difference, and then we divide that by the amount of the average amount of price. So we basically take the original price and the new price, find out the average, and that's what we do for a dialyzer. Exactly the same methodology to calculating the elasticity of supply. But again, what we're looking to say is how sensitive are suppliers to providing more or less product, depending if the price went up or down. So we're kind of looking at that type of scenario. Again, the mechanics of the calculation are exactly the same. Okay? So that's the elasticity of supply. It's a pretty straightforward one. And then we ask ourselves, what causes the elasticity of supply? You know, what are some of the things that would affect how sensitive a farmer is, for example, to growing more potatoes if the price of potatoes go up? Well, there's a number of things. First of all, the degree of specialization in production technology. How easy is it to shift production? Can you change from growing eggs to growing chickens? Is it a real change for a farmer to grow more potatoes and less carrots if the demand, if the price of potatoes go up? So the basic question is, can the producer switch to a different product if that different product is more higher priced and they could get more money for it? And really, too, it depends on the length of time since the price change. People adapt to price changes. So again, if it's a long time, people are not going to be affected by it because they're going to forget that the price was the original price to start with. We can take a look at how this is played out in terms of the supply and demand curve by looking at a typical supply and demand curve here for, you can see the price per bushel, you can see the quantity per period supplied. So we have the supply line, and supply line goes up and it intersects the demand line at a price of $7 per bushel and 60 units. So this then would become, this is the equilibrium price, okay? So at the present equilibrium price, what is the total revenue received by farmers? So in order to be able to calculate that, we got to take the price per bushel, $7, and multiply it by the 60, in this case is millions of bushels. So 7 by 6 is $42 million. Suppose that the oat industry had a very good harvest and supply increased by $30 million bushels. Draw the new supply curve. So now I'm going to draw the supply curve with my little wavy pen here. So let's assume that the bushels went up by 30 million. So the 30 million bushels, so it went from 60 to 70 to 80 to 90. So what you'd have is a new supply curve that would run parallel to the old supply curve, but be over by 3 blocks. So effectively, it would go along here like this. Okay. I can't physically draw it with this system I got here, so it would be along here like this, 3 blocks over to the right. And if we drew that and we had it 3 blocks over, we would effectively be looking at a break even around here somewhere. Okay, 3 blocks over, 1, 2, 3, it'll be right here. And what would be the new total revenue received by farmers in millions of dollars? Well, it would be a price of 5 and a quantity of 80. 5 times 8, we are looking at 40. Okay, so it'd be $40 million. So effectively, then we'd ask ourselves, okay, what did we have in the first place? We had 42 in the first place, and now with this situation of bringing more oats onto the market, 30 million more oats, the price of the oats fell, so the total revenue actually decreased. So this would suggest an elastic demand for oats. Okay, so the demand for oats dropped more, and that meant that our actual revenue went down. Okay, see how I did that? The next one that I want to look at in terms of And okay, what other types of elasticities do we have out there? We've talked about, when we talked about the price issue with regards to the price elasticity of demand, we talked about how income could affect price elasticity. Because if you had a really high income and what you were buying was small and the price of it went up, you'd say, well, it's such a small percentage of my income, it doesn't affect me. Well, income elasticity is kind of a derivative of that, because what it really looks at, it says, okay, if I had my income rise up, okay, what impact would that have on my purchasing of a given item? Okay, so my income changed. So what I'm looking at is to say my income started out here and it went up. Let's assume it went up. Because your income went up, it means you got more money to spend. If you got more money to spend, what impact would it have on the purchasing of a given product? Normally, you would think that if your income goes up, you're probably going to buy more products, because the fact is you got more money to spend. Okay, that's the logic of it. But when we look at income elasticity, we have to think of two types of goods. We think of something called a normal good and something called an inferior good, okay? So let's just go back to the scenario again to make sure you understand. So what we're doing with income elasticity is measuring the demand for a product given that your income went up or down. So let's assume it goes up. Let's just work on the upside direction. So we're really measuring what was the percentage change in your income and what was the change in the demand for a given product that you're going to buy with that income. So we've got the percentage change in quantity demand divided by the percentage change in income. The way you calculate it is basically the same as what we've done before. We take the absolute, we divide it by the average in both cases, and that gives us our elasticity, or income elasticity is called. So you would think intuitively, if you make a lot more money, you're probably going to buy more of certain items. And you think to yourself, what kind of certain items would I buy more of? Steak. Yeah, I'm going to buy more steak because I like steak, and I'm going to buy more of it, and I can afford it. Okay? That type of good that you get more of as your income goes up is called a normal good. Economists call that a normal good. And these are goods that the demand for them increases as your income increases. Rolls Royces would be normal goods. You're going to sell more, or buyers are going to buy more Rolls Royces as your income goes up. Okay? So these types of products are the ones that you like. They're what we call aspirational products. We aspire to them, things that you want that normally you can't buy because you don't have enough money. But there's another type of good that plays into when your income goes up. You're probably going to buy less of cheap food, craft dinner, okay, or hamburger meat, regular hamburger meat, we'll call it. As your income goes up, you're going to say, I'm going to buy more steak, or I'm going to go out and eat out in a restaurant more often. I'm not going to make craft dinner because that's just yuck. And I'm not going to be buying bologna, and I'm not going to be buying hamburger meat because I can afford better. People aspire to better stuff. These goods are called inferior goods. Anything that's in the dollar store will be considered an inferior good, because what it is the demand for that product that's sitting on the shelf there in the dollar store, or the bologna, or the hamburger meat. The demand for that tends to drop as the consumer makes more money. So the big takeaway from the income elasticity, the measurement, I'm not going to get too concerned about, but the process works exactly the same, right? The formula is change in quantity over the change in income. So in order to calculate that, it's exactly the same as what we looked at before. But the key thing is to say, look, there are certain types of goods that we'll buy more of as we make more income, and there are certain types of goods that we'll make less of as we make more income. And goods that we'll buy more of are called normal goods. They're normally what you buy more of. Steak, fancy cars, nice homes, these sorts of things we tend to buy more of as we get better off. As we get better off, though, there are certain goods that we buy less of because we are better off. We're not buying as much hamburger meat. We're not buying as much Kraft dinner. We're not buying as much stuff in the dollar store. These sorts of things will be adversely affected because we make more money. Fair enough?
Yeah.
The final one that I want to look at was one that's kind of really interesting. And it's really interesting because we have talked about in the previous chapter this concept of substitutes or complements. And what we mean by substitutes or complements is, well, first, substitutes. As I buy one thing, I can probably not be buying very much of something else. So, for example, I will buy more steak and less hamburger. Steak is a substitute for hamburger, especially if my income goes up, right? Or if I can't go on vacation, I'm going to buy more Sea-Doos because I can stay home and play around in my local pond as opposed to going on a fancy vacation. And that's really what we're seeing now with the demand because of COVID. A lot of people can't go on vacation. So the demand for toys, trikes, bikes, and toys like that have gone up phenomenally in the last 2 years because people have their vacation money now. They can't spend it on travel, so they're spending it on other things. So this is part of the reason why there's a shortage of those types of products at this instant. But what cross-elasticity of demand looks at, it says, oh, well, that's kind of a neat thing that we'll buy more of something, okay, if the price of something else is affected. So what you got to do in order to think about cross-elasticity of demand is to think about two products, skis and ski boots. Okay, these are products that normally you buy together. They're complements. Okay, they're complements. If I'm going to buy skis, I need to buy ski boots as well. If I'm going to buy a car, I'm going to have to buy more gasoline as well. Okay, these are what are called complements. And all the cross-elasticity of demand does is it measures how much of a complement one product is relative to the other. And in fact, if there's if you tend to buy a lot less of one because you bought more of the other, they're substitutes for one another. So we'll call if it shows that you buy a lot less of one because you bought more of the other, we're going to say it's a substitute. If you tend to buy more of one and more of the other at the same time, they're complements. So this little mathematical formula here in terms of looking at the demand for of a given item is really designed to say, is this a complement or a substitute? So the formula is, you look at the percentage change in the quantity demand of product A. We'll call it product A. There are A and B products. You're going to look at A versus the price of B, the change in the price of B. So you're going to compare the change in the quantity of one versus the change in the price of the other. So by comparing the two, you'll see, did the price change in one influence the one you're looking at? So effectively, it determines whether or not the two are related in terms of you buy more of one when you buy more of the other, or you buy less of one when you buy more of the other. So this is a neat little comparison because a lot of products are complements. You buy more of one with more of the other. And it's nice to see, is there a good, solid complementary relationship between the two? So the cross-elasticity of demand measures the degree to which the two are complements. So effectively, substitute goods have positive value for cross-elasticity, whereas complement goods have a negative value for cross-elasticity. This relationship gives you, this calculation will give you a plus or a minus number. And the plus number would be substitutes, and negative number will be complements. Here is an example of this. Consider butter and margarine. So an increase in the price of margarine will lead to an increase in the demand for butter. Now let's just sit back and think about that without worrying about math. We know that butter and margarine do the same thing. So they're substitutes for one another, okay? If you can't buy butter, you'll buy margarine. So what we have is quantity demand per week and the price. And what we got is the quantity demand for the other product. So we got the price information there for margarine and butter and quantity information for margarine and butter. So you'll see in terms of margarine here, the price was $1.50 and we sold 5,000. The price $2.10 and we sold 3,200. It's normal that as the price went up, you'd buy less of the other. And if you look at butter was $3 and the demand is 1,000, and the butter was $3 and the demand was 2,000. Oh, okay. Well, the price of butter didn't change, but the demand for it changed. What happened? Well, what happened is people went and switched out to the substitute. So we can actually do the math on that. Given the data in the table above, it seems clear that an increase in the demand for butter is a result of a change in the price of margarine. And since the price of butter remains unchanged, but the quantity demand increases, the cross elasticity of demand for butter for margarine therefore is, and this is how it's calculated. So what we're looking at is the quantity change in one of them. So we're looking at the quantity change in butter. So the quantity change in butter went from 1,000 to 2,000. So the absolute difference, 1,000 to 2,000 is 1,000. The average 1,000 to 2,000 is 1,500. There it is right there. So this gives the percent change in quantity of butter. And we've got to compare that with the percent change in the price for the competing product, in this case, margarine. So the margarine price went from $1.50 to $2.10, which is a 60-cent difference, hence this right here. The average is $1.80, hence this right here. And that's really a 33% change in the price of margarine led to a 67% change in the demand for butter. So it's a positive, it yields a positive number. We see a positive number. And we go back here, substitute goods have a positive value in cross elasticity. So we're not looking at the value itself, we're looking at whether it's plus or minus. So when you're looking at a cross elasticity, the sign of the coefficient is what's important. The fact that the coefficient is positive confirms that the two goods are substitutes and reinforces something we learned in chapter 2, a rise in the price of product will increase the demand for substitute products. You know, it's intuitive, but what we're doing is just proving the intuition with the math. So those are really the key points that you have in the elasticity chapter. And again, most importantly, that price elasticity demand that we spent a couple of periods on, that's the most important part. These few items right here are interesting to know just to get a sense that we can measure elasticity in different aspects too, for supply, for income, and cross elasticity. I've got some questions in at the tail end of the chapter, and these are there, and I would ask you to take a look at them.